Hello and welcome to today's video, and today we're going to be resurrecting the XJ40. This video was taken in July of 2021. First thing that I wanted to do was to get the tyres pumped up. They had actually maintained quite a bit of air, but I pumped them up to slightly over 30 psi, to around 35, to get rid of any flat spots. The next thing was to give the car a quick clean with some of this good quality waterless wash and wax, which I like to use. You can see there that the fuel filler is currently missing, because at the time that was with the company doing the paintwork on the new boot lid. So once we've actually moved house, that's going to be one of the first jobs that I'll be doing to this particular car, is actually fitting the new boot lid. The next thing is to get the battery in place. Now, the battery has been on trickle charge over the winter, using my Maypole charger. Now, MOTs do actually require you to have the battery stay in place, so make sure that you do fit that, as I'm doing here. Also gives you a good opportunity to inspect the bulkhead area. I thought I had a bit of rust, actually turns out it was just a bit of congealed wax oil from one of my many applications of wax oil over the years. What you also want to do when you're putting the battery back in is to make sure that you don't get the expansion tank drainage line trapped underneath the battery. And there's also a vacuum line for the, I think it's for the heating system, or it might even be for the engine management. It might be for the engine management actually, but there's another vacuum line that goes under there. I think it is for... I don't know what it's for actually. I want to say engine management, because it's going into that general sort of area, but obviously make sure that that is also not being affected by the battery. Once you've got the terminals on, obviously make sure that you give them a bit of a tighten up, and then give the terminals a bit of a wriggle, just to make sure that they're not going to come loose, as I'm doing here. So there I am, just checking that the drainage pipe there is out of the way. And I'm also making sure that that vacuum line there I was talking about just now is also out of the way. Now, that's the bit there that I thought, oh blimey, I've got some bulkhead rust. After touching it, it actually, as I said, it did actually just turn out to be a bit of wax oil, which is obviously sort of just collected there over the years. So the next thing that I wanted to do after doing this was to actually get the plugs out of the engine, because what I'm going to be doing is turning the car over with no plugs and basically no compression. This is to build up oil pressure. Because the engine has been sat for a year without being started, the last thing that I want to do is to start it with plugs in there, and obviously with full compression. So if I can do it by just spinning it over on the starter, that's going to be a lot healthier for the engine. So starting with number 1, popped out number 1, and then popped out 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. I then removed each of the plugs in turn and set them on the scuttle area, with number 6 at the back, number 1 at the front, so that when they actually went back into the engine, all of the same plugs were going back into the same space. Something else that you might want to consider doing is giving the car an oil change before actually starting, which is something I didn't do on this occasion, because it was changed fairly recently. I didn't record it, but it was changed fairly recently. Just actually taking a look at the plugs there, and you can see that they're not in bad condition. If anything, the engine, you could say, is running a little bit lean, but I think that's just sort of the way these are. There are lots of or sort of bits of brown grey deposits on there, so the plugs are well suited to the engine, and the engine is in good condition. The plugs are also fairly recent, with not many miles on them, so that's also probably why there's not really that much in the way of deposits. Before spinning the engine over, I wanted to check the fluid levels, so here I'm just checking the oil, which is at maximum. I also checked the antifreeze earlier, and although it didn't seem like there was much in there, I'm putting that down to settlement, because it certainly didn't flag up anything on the VCM when I started the engine, and there were no overheating issues or anything of that nature. Before I'd set off tomorrow to the MOT station, I will just top it up with a bit of antifreeze. And also just checking the automatic transmission fluid, which is a nice cherry red colour, And as you can see here, just checking the antifreeze. That incidentally is a brand new expansion tank cap, because the other one was absolutely ruined. And you can see in there is antifreeze in there, but it's very likely just settled whilst the car has actually been standing, and a lot of it has probably just gone back into the block. However, when we actually start running the car, you will probably find once the car is warm that will actually fill up quite quickly. As I say, I will put a little bit in there. You never want to fill it. You generally want to sort of keep it about halfway, so there's obviously room for expansion. The next thing that I wanted to do was obviously make sure, because I'm doing it in this closed space in the garage, make sure that the window is open. What I've done in the past is actually use some old vacuum cleaner hoses, attached them to both exhausts and hung them out of the windows, so you don't get any sort of petrol fumes in the garage whatsoever. Ideally, you'd want to be able to open the back door as well, but that was not something I was able to do. I didn't run it for too long whilst I was stood in the garage, and if I did want to run it, I just actually went outside of the garage, let it idle, and then went back in to stop it. What I'm doing here is I'm actually spinning it over on the starter, and what I'm watching for is the second gauge down, which is the oil pressure gauge. I want to get a good amount of pressure built up. Now, you don't just hold it on the starter, because you don't want to overheat the starter itself. So you give it a couple of, say, 10-second bursts with a rest in between. And what you'll sort of eventually find is that the pressure will build up and you'll be ready to go. Now, because the engine had been standing for quite some time, it did take a little while for the pressure to build up. You can actually see where it starts to flash. That's where it generally means that pressure is beginning to build up. So on this particular go now, leaving it for a bit of time to settle, spin it over, and flashing, still flashing, and there you go, pressure starting to come in, pressure starting to build. Let it build all the way to just under 4 bar, then shut the engine off. Next thing you want to do is, I'm not sure if I actually span it over, yeah, I think I span it over again here just to make sure it had actually built pressure. And the next thing that I did was to pop the plugs back into the engine. But I was actually interested just to have a look down the plug holes themselves, down to the piston crowns. Now I've got a an endoscope type tool, fibre optic sort of camera thing, which I will sort of pop down there at some point, but I was actually quite impressed with the fact that the camera would actually focus down into there, and with the light on the camera I was able to get sort of quite a good shot down into the bores there just to see how the crowns look. They are predictably covered in carbon, but not too much carbon. Exactly what you would expect. The next thing is to obviously get the car started. So the plugs are now back in the engine, and we're basically going to start the engine. So there we go, engine is turning over, I think, and there it goes, started up. Ignore the flicker on the VCM, that is quite normal. They do seem to sort of refresh sideways, which is quite interesting. Now, as you can see there, the oil pressure is starting to build. It did drop off a bit because obviously the engine had been settling. With the battery charge, just give it a little bit of a rev. You don't want to, rev it ridiculously. Just a little touch of a rev to fast idle is more than enough, to be perfectly honest with you. You don't need to sort of floor the pedal or anything like that. Nothing stupid. The next thing is to do a quick walk around and actually to test the various functions, mainly the lights. So certainly the first thing I did was to check the side lights. So we just turned on the side lights. We're now going round to the front of the car, and you can see that the side lights are working absolutely fine. Now, at some point, a new headlight unit has been fitted to the near side, which is why you can see one has got a side light and the other one hasn't. That does come up as an advisory on every MOT. I could just remove the bulb, but to be honest with you, in my weird sort of mind, if I've got an advisory, then it's better than having a major, and if I fix everything then something else will go wrong. So if I leave that in place as broken, then something else won't go wrong to replace it. So I also checked the rear lights as well, and also the number plate bulbs, both were working. Also put it onto dip beam and had a quick check of dip beam there. You can see that that is absolutely fine. Then activated the main beam, which I'm just doing there. Actually just turned off the fog lights, so I noticed that they were on. So just activating the main beam, as you can see there. There it is. And there's actually really sort of no need to actually pop round to check them individually because they are very much on. Then deactivating the main beam, which I'm just doing now. And then the next thing was I actually did check the fog lights at that point. But first, I think I checked I did check the fog lights at that point. So you can see that both sides are on. I think for the MOT it just needs to be the driver's side that's working, but because this does have two, I'd like to have both of them working, which is why a couple of years ago I replaced one side. Indicators next, so this is the off side, so just checking that all the indicators flash, all the bulbs flash rather, and they're not putting out clear light. So it's always the side repeaters that are a bit iffy on these, because they've got, certainly on the early XJ40s, they've got this little sort of coloured dome, which is coloured orange, and it's usually the orange dome that goes clear. You can see on this one, for example, that is borderline. So that may actually need either an orange bulb or the dome replacing with an orange dome. I think in the past I've just used orange bulbs rather than just replacing the dome itself. You can also get some glass paint, very much like the paint I used on the micro interior bulbs, but in orange, which will probably be something I'll do at some point. As I say, I'm going to pop it in for its MOT and see how it runs and how it goes. Next one is a check of the washer jets and the wiper. The washer jet is working absolutely fine. At some point I'm going to restore the original pillar jets, but during the car's sabbatical the washer jets were both taken away. The pillar ones are notoriously problematic. And as you can see here, the next thing I'm trying to do is test the horn. Now, I noted that the horn was not working. So I thought, oh great, brilliant, it worked for a bit and now it's broken. So what I did after I shut the engine off was, first off, make sure that the relay for the horn, which is in the left-hand front relay pack, make sure that the relay is clicking. I then had my son Christian sit in the car and activate the horn whilst I tested for voltage on both of the connectors. So it's a dual tone horn, so there's 4 connectors in total. So what you want to do is check that you get a 12 volt feed whenever the horn button is pressed on all 4 of the connectors. If I remember rightly, yellow is positive, black is negative. The final thing that I did was cleaned up the contacts and also cleaned up the relay contacts as well. Once that was done, horn operation was fully restored. All you need to do is actually just remove a little grill on the front and you've got access to both of the horns. Anyway, the car's now ready to go for its MOT tomorrow. Hopefully you've liked this. If you have, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.